Friends make the worst enemies when they turn foes. Apple and Google, the former digital bedfellows, are now enemies at war. Here's why. Their journey began in 2007. The iPhone and Google Maps had what seemed like the ideal digital partnerships. Google's blockbuster map service, which allows web users to find businesses, check traffic conditions, and get directions, has helped Apple incorporate its iPhone become wildly successful. Surging iPhone use has in turn driven tons of web traffic to Google's search engine through Google Maps. A win-win for both parties. They were such close allies that former Google CEO, now technical advisor of Alphabet Incorporated, Eric Schmidt, sat on the Apple Board of Trustees. Well, that didn't last long. The relationship went down the drain when Google created its mobile operating system, known as Android, thereby entering the smartphone market. While the entry of Google into the smartphone market might have set off the fire, a further strain on their relationship occurred in late 2009. Apple wanted turn-by-turn directions, a feature available in Google's own Android. Google did not want to license this feature to Apple because it gave them a competitive advantage over Apple. When it comes to iOS map apps, turn-by-turn directions were at the top of the list of requests by Apple customers. When Apple Map debuted, in comparison to Google Maps is a far cry. Google had a 7-year head start, during which the company had pretty much excelled in searching and information management, had collected data manually, driven around vehicles to map roads, contained vast amounts of user feedback and corrections, and had 7 years of published, tweaked, and corrected data. As for Apple, well, they had second-rate data sources like TomTom to fall back on, most of whom relied on their internal data and testing rather than sourcing user-submitted corrections and feedback as Google had. So, the war seemed lost before it began. We'll likely never know for certain whether Apple was pushed to release its mapping solution before it was fully ready, whether it scrambled to throw something together quickly, or whether this was the way it would have ended up no matter what happened with Google Maps. But either way, when negotiations broke down for using Google's Maps data on iOS devices, Apple was forced to strike out on its own. And the end result was a disaster. Cutthroat competition is supposed to be good for consumers, but the battle between Apple and Google Maps over Maps shows that's not always the case. The introduction of Apple's Maps with its iOS 6 software in September 2012 caused a furor after it emerged that they were littered with errors.
Users have taken to Twitter and Tumblr to showcase the most egregious failures. Collapsed buildings, walking directions that lead nowhere, and satellite images completely obscured by clouds.
The change was widely panned by consumers, who complained that Apple stuck them with something inferior to hurt one of its biggest competitors. Some user experiences cited errors like a location in Ireland named Airfield was marked as an airport, Paddington Station had vanished, and Helsinki Railway Station was, it seemed, a park. The company was panned, and Chief Executive Tim Cook made a public apology. He also fired Scott Forstall, the head of the iPhone software team, and Maps chief Richard Williamson soon afterwards. It's glaring that Apple lost in the beginning, but they seem to still be in the race. The question now is, was there a turnaround, and has Apple Maps gained ground against Google Maps in recent years? Not only does Google Maps render the actual shapes of homes and buildings, it even captures garages, bay windows, outdoor steps, and satellite dishes on the roof. By contrast, Apple Maps only features buildings for a few major cities. Google appears to be spending vastly more on developing the technology used to produce its maps, especially in the area of machine learning for tracing from aerial imagery, and has far more expertise with handling colossal amounts of data. Well, you should know that the flaws and foibles of Apple Maps years ago are all but gone. The directions that Apple Maps provides to be every bit as reliable as those from Google, although, of course, your mileage may vary in both directions, depending on where you are. And its point of interest and database search has rapidly improved against Google's as well. Is it completely Google Maps equal in every way? No, probably not. But Apple has done a great job of closing the year's gap, reducing it to much more minimal differences. Apple's rapidly increasing how much it spends on its maps, especially in gobbling up smaller companies to provide technology and talent. It seems determined to compete with Google, but Google is still well ahead. Users have praised Apple Maps' user interface. Apple have chosen design principles that make Apple Maps feel less cluttered compared to Google Maps. However, if you need to find specific info on a particular place, you still can't beat Google's information database. It is unrivaled and likely always will be. Eventually, both maps will be excellent, highly detailed, accurate, and up-to-date. But for now, they both still have lots of inaccuracies, empty spots, and out-of-date data and imagery. The race is wide open. Today, the relationship between Apple and Google has been watered down to Google just being another major developer on Apple's platform. They pay Apple billions of dollars a year for the privilege of being the default search engine in Safari on iOS devices. This brings us to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications.